You ever get that feeling that a piece of the official story is missing? That the version of things we all accept just doesn't quite add up? Well, today, we're going on a journey into a really powerful idea, one that was deliberately buried for centuries. We're going to follow a seeker on a quest to uncover the Gnostic heresy of self-knowledge.
So, our story kicks off, like so many do, with just one person on a quest. Picture this, a world, a whole civilization that's run by one single unbending truth. But for our seeker, this official story, it just feels empty. This isn't some act of rebellion. It's a deep spiritual hunger for something more.
And it's this hollowness, this nagging feeling that the official scriptures are incomplete that drives our seeker out into the world. They're going to find the missing pages of history for themselves.
Now, this journey doesn't take them down the well-lit, accepted paths of knowledge. Oh no, it takes them into what you could call the shadowlands of human thought. The places where forgotten ideas are just waiting. They're looking for what was left out on purpose. And it's deep in these shadowlands that they finally find it. A hidden chamber, untouched for who knows how long. And inside, a scroll that promises a totally different kind of knowledge. This is that big moment of discovery, right? The point where everything is about to change. And this story kind of mirrors real history, like when the Nag Hammadi Library, a whole collection of these exact kinds of texts, was dug up in Egypt back in 1945. It brought all these buried ideas right back into the light.
So the seeker unrolls this ancient scroll, and what they find is just revolutionary. The core idea is this. You don't need some big external institution to give you enlightenment. You've already got it. There's a divine spark inside every single person, and real wisdom, real truth, comes from looking inward to find it.
And right here, you can see the central conflict crystal clear. The established way of thinking preached that truth is external. It's handed down by powerful institutions, and it requires your obedience. But this radical, new idea, it says that truth is internal. It's found through knowing yourself, through relying on that divine spark you already have inside you. We're talking about a fundamental shift in where power even comes from.
This is probably the most empowering part of this whole philosophy. It's basically saying that you, yes, you, already hold the keys to the entire universe. You don't need to ask for permission to understand it because a little piece of it is already inside of you. I mean, what an incredibly powerful worldview.
So this brings up a huge question. If this idea is so amazing, so empowering, why was it buried? Why isn't this common knowledge? As our seeker keeps reading, they realize the scroll itself contains the clues, revealing this whole architecture of silence.
Okay, so here's the bottom line. This Gnostic path was a direct threat to the status quo. Think about it. If people can find divinity inside themselves, what happens to the big institutions whose entire power is based on being the only gatekeepers to the truth? Well, they'd become unnecessary. This idea wasn't buried because it was wrong, it was buried because it was dangerous to them.
And let's be really clear about this. The disappearance of these teachings was no accident. They didn't just get forgotten over time. No, this was an intentional, deliberate campaign of suppression. A choice was made to silence this entire way of thinking. And there was a playbook, a kind of three-step process for how they did it. First, you label the idea heresy. That creates fear and distrust right off the bat. Second, you actively oppose it. You work systematically to hide the teachings, or you just discredit them. And third, you censor it from the official story, pushing the idea so far out of the mainstream narrative it's like it never existed. That's the architecture of silence right there.
As our seeker is putting all these pieces together, they have one last, really profound realization. It's about the nature of forbidden knowledge itself and the words they used to condemn it. They called it the uncanny hook. That word, heresy, it was more than just a label. It was an unintentional signpost. For most people, the timid ones, it's a warning sign that tells them to stay away. But for the curious, for the inquisitive, it becomes a beacon. It's a signal that says, hey, something powerful is buried here. Something the establishment really doesn't want you to find.
And this really just sums up the whole journey, doesn't it? This way of thinking was pushed to the edges, not because it was false, but because it was just too controversial. Its suppression had nothing to do with a lack of truth, but everything to do with its power. It was simply too much of a challenge to the institutions of the day.
So, the seeker closes the scroll, and the full picture is finally clear. You can suppress an idea, you can bury texts, for sure, but a spark of truth, that can never really be put out. History tried its best to forget it,
but it's still alive, just waiting in the shadows for anyone brave enough to go looking for it.
And that brings our little journey to a close, but it leaves us with one last thought to chew on. If history is filled with ideas that were called heretical only because they threaten the status quo, what about today? What are the heresies that we're told to fear right now? And how many of them are just sparks of truth, waiting for us to discover them?